and gentlemen, welcome to this week's edition of the Sunday Wire. I'm your host, Patrick Henningsen. We're streaming out live on the Alternate Current Radio Network and also at 21stcenturywire.com. Great to have you guys with us for this live broadcast. This is episode 537 of this weekly Omnibus News and Analysis radio program. Again, brought to you here on ACR, and we're going to be joined in a few minutes. We'll be breaking for the second segment. We're going to be joined by some of our team from the Alternate Current Radio Network. I think Brian McLean, aka Hesher, and Adam Clark, aka Ruckus, as well as Basil Valentine, the political editor at the Pulse.today. Hopefully you'll be joining us in the end of the first hour, maybe beginning of the second hour. And it's been quite an eventful day in terms of U.S. politics. That's for absolute certain. Let's see, the meltdown, if that's what you want to call it, which took place in the White House, in the Oval Office, was certainly epic and has some huge implications, some massive ramifications on so many different levels. One of them, of course, is going to be the future of this war in Ukraine. Is it actually going to wrap up? What's going to happen with Europe moving into the fold? These are all questions I think that we're going to have to hopefully wait and find out. But I have a feeling this is going to be a lot more complicated than people realize. What we have to remember is that it took us a lot to get into this mess. We're three years into this proxy war against Russia in Ukraine, and I don't know how many hundreds of billions collectively, how many dead soldiers, especially on the Ukrainian side, but also on the Russian side, and just the amount of bad will that's been cultivated by the West in trying to prosecute this proxy war. It's something that it's not going to be easy to undo. No matter how badly the actors involved might want it to end, but it's also debatable whether or not Ukraine and the current leadership under Zelensky actually wants it to wrap up. This is debatable. It seems like, and this is something I explored in an article which is up at 21stcenturywire.com. We'll bring this up on stage. Hopefully, if we can bring this up here. Now, this is a piece which I penned last night, and I think it's got a lot of these important points here. Just go to 21stcenturywire.com, take a look at that article. And what we did was break down a lot of this, a lot of the main points that I think are going to be at play with this situation. And we break it down in terms of, what can we expect? What's going to happen next? And this is the big question. And this can go a lot of different ways, and explore all the different aspects of this. Now, let's just first start off with the main point. Whose fault was this? Why did this meltdown happen? The U.S. media is accusing Donald Trump of laying a trap for poor Volodymyr Zelensky, and I tend to not believe that. Having watched the full length of this exchange, the whole press conference, which took place in the White House on Friday, it started off very cordial. Things seemed to be going well. And then Zelensky, though, however, was not well. He was visibly fidgeting, disheveled, and he looked very uncomfortable. And especially when the topic of Putin and Russia came up. And, we'll explore some of these clips with our guests when we bring Hesher and Ruckus on stage. But Zelensky looked like, and I have a clip montage I'll save for later, but he looked like he was under the influence of some kind of narcotics. And I don't say that just jokingly. I'm dead serious. I actually put a highlight clip together of scenes where we just zeroed in on Zelensky's face. And this guy was probably, I don't know, did Sean Penn meet him at the airport at Dulles with some party favors, and did they pull an all-nighter? What happened at the Waldorf Astoria presidential suite? Where was Sean Penn in all this? These are the sort of questions that we're interested in answering, because Zelensky was off his trolley, okay? Absolutely mullered. And it was, for Ukrainians, I would say this was an unmitigated disaster on so many different levels. because what happened, and then Zelensky compounded the problem by going on Brett Baer's special report on Fox afterwards and looked even more stupid after he did that. And so, I mean, you can look at their fortunes going down the drain, but there's such a gravy train in Kiev. It is so corrupt. The corruption's just so deep now. And the reason is because when you flood the zone with free money, this is what happens. So while Ukraine was like number 1 or number 2 on the global corruption index before the conflict, they probably have to set up a new index for Ukraine now because it's just gotten so much more corrupt because of all the money that's been shoveled into that country. And Zelensky realizes that he needs the war to go on. So this is when he got nervous. Whenever Trump talked about bringing it to an end, or we're talking with Russia to negotiate a settlement, Zelensky started shaking, is twitching and things like that, started like touching his nose constantly. So he's getting visibly nervous at the idea or hearing a U.S. president talk about peace and talk about bringing the conflict to an end. So clearly there is a class of people, a very crass, a very narcissistic, a very demonic and corrupt class in Ukraine that is living off of European and U.S. cash, free money that's just been pumped into that country to keep this proxy war going. They don't want it to end because the minute it ends, they might have to like this. They're definitely going to come under U.S. or European governance or something. You know, if the war ever ends, there's going to be very tight controls over the permanent financial aid. Ukraine's going to be on permanent financial aid. But right now they're on military and financial aid. So this is the way it's going to go. And so when we look in this article, some of the things I explore was, you know, how the conversation broke down. And it did break down before the exchange with J.D. Vance. And I explained some of the parts where, you know, it looked like it was going south. But, you know, this is basically like an episode of The Apprentice. Trump took one of his contestants and basically fired him, executed him publicly on global TV. I mean, it's a terrible look. It's a bad, you know, I'll argue as well, it's a bad look for the president and the vice president be scrapping with such a lowlife like Zelensky. You know, it's not even a second tier country. I mean, I was kind in this article and called him a second tier leader, but they're much lower than a second tier. So you don't want to actually be on the ground scrapping. But I can see the New York and Trump was coming out. Vance was getting his shots in as well. So they sort of mauled Zelensky. He's like took a public mauling of the little green man from Kiev. Okay. And that's not a good look for a US president. However, you could tell there's a lot of pent up frustration because this guy, his regime, and this whole situation is such a farce. It is such a farce. And the cheek of them to be begging to extend the war and the lunacy of European leaders to be egging him on to carry this war on. And how many more hundreds of thousands of Ukrainian men are going to be thrown into the meat grinder and die for absolutely no gain whatsoever for Ukraine, other than basically being slaughtered at the altar of Western vanity or NATO vanity, because that's what this is. That's what this is about at this point. There's no military gain. There's no economic gain. There's just vanity for the West, vanity, and whatever money they can launder through Ukraine and put back in their pockets. Okay, that's all that's left. They're feeding off a dead carcass here. And the carcass is getting smaller and smaller. As the gag continues, Ukraine will invariably lose more men, more resources, more land, more territory. And Russia is not going to stop until it gets what it wants, which is to secure its national security perimeter. Quite simply. Okay. This is what it was like from the beginning. And it's getting worse because the more attacks that NATO and Britain and the United States encourage Zelensky and give him arms and missiles to attack Russia inside their mainland, it's only going to harden the resolve of the Russian Federation to secure their national security perimeter. The outlying areas will get bigger, get deeper. Follow me on this, ladies and gentlemen. I know this is a difficult concept for Ukraine supporters in the West, but the deeper Ukraine strikes into the Russian mainland, including hitting early warning nuclear radar systems, which Zelensky has done 1,000 kilometers inside Russian mainland territory. The deeper you strike, the more the Russians will be more determined, and their resolve will be hardened to extend their security perimeter. That includes increasing the territory they currently hold. Okay, so the longer the gag goes on, the more provocations that Britain encourages Zelensky to do, and the Biden administration did. I don't know about the Trump administration yet. They could switch the war machine on any moment. Okay, we don't know. Looks like Trump wants peace so far, but the Europeans are a little bit crazy. They've all gone nuts in Brussels. They want to sort of keep the war going. They're getting Nazi fever once again. The Germans and in Brussels, they want to keep it going. You're only going to push the Russians harder, okay? And they're only going to react and respond in kind. And if history is your judge, a little word of advice to people in the West, okay? I said this a couple of times in the last week or so on various podcasts, that it's so funny when you speak to people in the West. You say, what are the most important battles of World War II? What are the main battles of World War II? And the Americans will raise their hands. It's D-Day, the Normandy landings, D-Day, yes, okay. Battle of the Bulge, yeah, General Patton, yep. Okay, the Battle of the Rhine, yeah, that was turn the tide, that was the biggest thing. Nobody knows, acknowledges, or speaks about anything on the Eastern Front. And that, ladies and gentlemen, is a product of Cold War propaganda in the West, which is to erase and expunge anything that the Soviet Union did during, the Red Army did during the Second World War, to erase it, completely eviscerate it, block it from public view in the West, okay, and then minimize any of the losses incurred by the Russians, Soviets during the Second World War. Because we can't be running around in the West with the narrative that Russia incurred the most human losses, made the biggest sacrifice, and took out the biggest percentage of the Nazi war machine on the Eastern Front. The biggest battle in World War II was not D-Day, okay, not even close, okay. D-Day was a tiny percentage of something like Operation Bagration in the Eastern Front, regarded as the greatest military battle in the history of warfare, largest, most comprehensive, and most extraordinary. Operation Barbarossa, likewise. It's when the Germans came to sweep into Russia over the very land that they're fighting on today. And let's be clear, it's the same people fighting. Russians versus Nazis. There might be slightly different insignias on the Ukrainian side, and the Europeans may have changed their flags in certain countries, but they are acting, talking, and behaving exactly like Nazis were in the Second World War, determined to push right up into the gut of Russia and to break the country into small pieces and basically topple the government in Moscow. This is the stated aims of the European Union, European leaders, okay, including Calais, as Basil Valentine says, callous by name, callous by nature, okay. She said, oh, maybe it would be good, this Estonian airhead, maybe it would be good if we break up Russia into smaller countries, but it'd be less dangerous, okay. This Estonia is a beautiful little country in the Baltic, yeah, but it's about the size of a mid-range U.S. city, okay? So these are the people that are dictating foreign policy, that are trying to chart the destiny of this planet. These are the madmen and madwomen in charge. Ursula von der Leyen, same thing. Leadership of Germany, very hawkish, and etc. Holland, Mark Rutte, new Secretary General of NATO, Dutch, totally off his nut, insane. Okay, these people are so divorced from reality, and the thing about the Europeans as well as the Americans. And when I say Americans, we have to own Joe Biden's role in all this. Okay, Americans and Trump supporters can't absolve their sins and say America's innocent just because there's a new president for 35 days. No. Okay. America and Europe's role in this is just so corrupt. Okay. And it continues to be corrupt. And the West, in its great determination to arm Ukraine to fight on, can't even find it within themselves to want to sacrifice any of their own men to defeat the Russians. If it's so important to defeat the Russians, why don't you send your own soldiers? Why did all the European countries just get together and fight that war with Putin, who's such an evil dictator, and his people, we're told, are fighting with shovels anyway, and on the brink of collapse? That's what they've been telling us for 3 years. Well, then send in the men, okay? Empty out your arsenals in Britain, in the Netherlands, in Germany, in France, in Sweden, in Finland, in Estonia, etc. Go ahead, invade Russia, or go into Ukraine, fight those Russians yourself, okay? Instead of watching and sitting back, sipping your mimosas at political receptions with canapes and champagne in Brussels, while 700,000 Ukrainian men get wiped off the face of the earth. For what? For what? To lose territory? To turn Ukraine into a dysfunctional rump state? Ukraine would have been fully intact had the United States not overthrown their government in 2014, because they were determined to push that country and use it as a battering ram to try to wreck Russia. And in the process, they wrecked Ukraine. They didn't wreck Russia. Russia's fine. Russia's going to survive. It's going to win this war, just like it won every other war on its doorstep in the past, in the modern era. Okay, it's going to be fine. They defeated Napoleon. They defeated the Kaiser. They defeated Hitler. And they defeated NATO. That's how this is going to be written. So why not draw a line under it now? Why keep the gag going? And we try to explore some of these points here in this article. So we want to encourage people to go and read that as well. So anyway, that's where things are at on that front. And yeah, it's absolutely regrettable. What a disaster in the White House. I've got some clips lined up, and we've got a lot of stuff to discuss. We're going to break down some of this when we bring the rest of our team down. But yeah, ladies and gentlemen, it's pretty incredible. It's a pretty incredible state of affairs that's unfolded here. And Zelensky is such a clown, such an absolute clown. This guy has really turned into the sideshow of sideshows. And meanwhile, Elon Musk is doing his Doge Act still. But, you know, it's funny. Elon Musk is all of a sudden tweeting a lot about, you know, how the Ukraine war needs to come to an end. But this is the same Elon Musk. This is the same guy that boasted that he provided the backbone for the Ukrainian military's front line by giving them Starlink kit and satellite access. That he's running the front line for the Ukrainian armed forces. Elon Musk has boasted about that previously. It was Elon Musk who supplied the Nazi Azov battalion with Starlink kit in the Azovstal plant during the siege and holdout there in May of 2022 while they were using human shields. Okay. And he helped to allow them to exfiltrate Nazis. Okay. So we haven't heard too much substantive commentary from Musk on Ukraine, but he's hugely compromised because he's played such a huge role in the conflict, basically, at least initially. Now he's switched gears. Yes, he did turn off Starlink to prevent attacks on Crimea. So we give him some props for that. But then after that, he went and boasted how he is basically running the front line for the Ukrainian military after he did the supposedly switched it off to prevent the Ukrainians from attacking Crimea. in the Odessa, Mykolaiv, Crimea area. He's turned around not long after that to defend himself with accusations of being a Russian agent. He went over the top, overcompensated as he normally does, and boasted how he was the backbone. He was the backbone, he said, for the Ukrainian front lines. The front lines are a meat grinder, okay? Nothing to boast about, Elon. Nothing to brag about, nothing to be proud of there. There's no Slava Ukraini with these front lines. They're a death sentence to conscripts that end up there after being bundled into a back of a van or a fake ambulance. This is another tactic the Ukrainians use. They use ambulances and pull up at supermarkets, people's homes, crosswalks, and just grab men. And no one's sort of alarmed when they see an ambulance because they think they're just going about their business. But so Zelensky's guilty of war crimes even against his own people in his country, because that's a war crime. Using medical vehicles for military activity, especially illegal or illicit military activity. So it's so funny. I mean, it's hard to know where to start. Zelensky told so many lies during this press conference with Trump. Too many lies to count. We might go through some of these things, but I mean, it was just unbelievable. The takeaway is Trump has his work cut out for him. This is not going to be easy. If the United States withdraws from Ukraine or decides to do arm's length management, this is not a great result because there's going to be a power vacuum. So who's going to move into that power vacuum? Well, the British are going to move into that power vacuum very aggressively. They've said very loudly they want a permanent base in Western Ukraine. That's going to keep the area and the region on edge, and that you're going to have continued attacks and etc. So if the British move in and then create provocations that make the Russians escalate, then America will get pulled back in to a bigger war. And this isn't the first time this has happened in history. Think about it. Europeans with their petty tribal rivalries and centuries-old geopolitical great game machinations start a world war and then pull the United States in, not once, but twice. Yes, it can happen like that. And who were the actors in Europe most responsible for that historically? Well, arguably, you can blame the Germans for a fair amount, but you can also blame the British. And who is the most hawkish on this Ukrainian conflict? Who is exhibiting the most animus towards Russia? It's Britain. So whatever it is with the British elite, they just will not let this go with Russia. They have to hurt, damage, destroy Russia by whatever it takes. And of course, it's a lot easier if you can pull the Americans in to do the actual job, but they can certainly light the fuse. Okay, that's something a lot of people are concerned about. There's other hawks, not just the British. There's new hawks that have arisen right across Europe. And so who are the reasonable adults in the room? So far, it looks like it's Hungary, Viktor Orban, Robert Fico in Slovakia, nearly had a president in Romania, nearly, but they've arrested him, canceled the election results, and thrown him in jail. He was anti-war, okay, unfortunately. So that would have been the whole line of contact with Ukraine, almost unanimously, with an exception of Poland, who are just insanely hawkish on this, but only when there's U.S. backing. If there's not full U.S. backing, you'll see the Poles will dial down their enthusiasm for war. And certainly they already are. They're not like jumping forward to provide, quote, peacekeeping troops in Ukraine. It's not happening. So isn't that interesting? And that's kind of how things are rolling right now with this. So these are some of the issues that the U.S. is going to face. Even if they sign the, quote, minerals deal, Trump and Zelensky, even if they sign the so-called, what they're calling the minerals deal, okay, at this conference, there's no guarantee that that's going to pass through the Ukrainian Rada. Has to be ratified by the Ukrainian parliament. There's no way around that. So Zelensky can sign whatever he wants, but imagine the excuse they gave when the West was encouraging them to overthrow Yanukovych in 2014. They say, oh, Ukraine's going to lose its sovereignty to Russia. Well, what do you call it when a Western country or multiple countries set a debt trap for you and then use it as collateral to steal all of your rare earth minerals? Is that not a threat to Ukraine's sovereignty? Is that not falling under the influence of a foreign power? Is that not colonialistic in nature? It's very colonial, very colonial. And so that kind of opportunism, changing the terms of the deal of financial aid that Joe Biden gave Ukraine, and I'm not defending Biden here. I'm just trying to get people to understand how this looks from the perspective of other countries that might partner with the U.S. in future in a proxy war. Yep, there's quite a few countries that might fall into that category. Or countries that want to sign a peace treaty or a deal with the U.S. So this is what Sergei Lavrov, Russian foreign minister, called the problem with the U.S. now, is that they're not agreement capable. They're not agreement capable. Another example, the JCPOA, Iran nuclear deal. Trump pulled out of it a year after coming into office at the behest of Benjamin Netanyahu. That was a deal that the U.S. worked like years on and had like many different countries involved in making that happen, including Russia, the P5+1 format. And it basically contained Iran with full international transparency. It was a great piece of, it's probably the most useful and only good thing Obama did while he was president. And then Trump came in with some pressure from the Israelis and just pulled the rug out from under it. Well, guess what? Who's going to come to the table with the U.S. to hammer out another nuclear deal? Nobody, because they know that whatever deal you sign with the U.S., it's going to be reversed or undone in 4 years potentially, because there's no more continuity in the U.S. The United States is no longer agreement capable. This is a problem. Russia knows this. So Russia's looking at this minerals deal play that Trump is attempting, and they're not liking it too much either, because it's just going to be more chaos. So the last thing you should be doing is preying on Ukraine, okay? Instead of limiting the damage, Trump is really only increasing the chance for more problems by trying to twist their arm and parlay Ukraine into a new predatory arrangement, okay? As if the last one wasn't bad enough. And by the way, Trump hasn't got the memo yet. Most of the, quote, rare earths, or as Trump calls them, raw earths, he's changed the term this week. It's no longer rare earths, it's raw earths, according to Trump. And he said it like 5 times as well, and like really kind of emphasized it. Raw earths. Most of the mineable and productive resources in that department are in the East, under Russian control. You're not going to get your hands on them, Donald, and neither is Zelensky. Do you trust the geological surveys of the Ukrainians, knowing how corrupt that country is? It's a lot more expensive. It's going to take them years, if not over a decade, to realize any sort of extraction, production, digging, as Trump calls it, to turn a profit on that. You're looking at 10 years. By that time, Trump's gone, the Republicans are gone, Zelensky is gone, you have new governments on every side. So it's a non-starter. A new Ukrainian president can come in and just cancel it. So this can't be the basis for peace. It can't be like, well, we'll get a deal, but we need to secure the loans or the lend-lease or, you know, the money that we've given Ukraine already. You just have to say goodbye to that money. You can make that back by promoting global peace and stability and seeing the market confidence increase. You'll make that money back. But I'm afraid it's a net loss. And trying to suck the remaining blood out of Ukraine, Donald, isn't necessarily going to be the best way to bring this thing to an end. I would argue it actually create potentially more problems inside and outside Ukraine than anything. Interesting idea. I don't know who gave it to you. It sounds like one of Jared Kushner's ideas over the dinner table, possibly, or on the back of a napkin. I'm not sure who gave you that one, Donald, but I don't think it's a good one. It's not good. What you should be doing is forcing Ukraine to the peace table. Maybe you can, after you get peace, then look on development deals or whatnot. But this idea of using Ukraine as a cash machine, which is what the Democrats did. This is what got us into this mess to begin with. Using Ukraine as an ATM machine for Uncle Sam, okay, bad idea. Democrats tried it already. The Bidens did it already, okay? And every other grifter in the Democrat donor class in the world of BlackRock. And George Soros did it before them. George Soros sucked all the blood out of Ukraine before Hunter Biden was even out of high school. Okay, they've done it already, and here we are hovering over Ukraine like a bunch of vultures, trying to pick apart the remaining pieces of it. This is how we got into the problem to begin with, so it can't be the solution. So I'm just throwing that out there for argument's sake. Sorry, ladies and gentlemen. I know this is going to hurt the feelings of MAGA. Okay, but someone needs to talk sense into these people because I don't know where they're coming up with this stuff. Honestly, it's shocking and embarrassing in equal measure. Anyway, what we're going to do right now is break here at ACR, and we come back. We're going to be joined by Hesher, Ruckus, perhaps Basil Valentine as well. So we will see you in just a few moments. We're streaming live on X right now. So I want to say hello to everybody on X, also on the Rumble streams, YouTube as well. Still got a live stream going on YouTube. And also we are streaming out on BitChute as well, BitChute Live and Facebook Live on our fan page. So we got a few viewers on there right now. Hope you guys are well. Thanks for tuning in. But in the meantime, let's transition off, and we're going to listen to the music of our friend Joseph Arthur. We'll be back in just a few minutes. Stay with us.